We like to believe we are in control of our lives, consciously steering the wheel of our mind. But Jung warned this is an illusion. Beneath awareness operates a hidden navigation system. Unless we learn how it works, we risk drifting aimlessly toward empty or destructive destinations. This inner navigation system is complex, built from unconscious structures that influence everything we think, feel, and do. It is more powerful than our conscious choices. Jung compared it to software running silently in the background, shaping our lives without permission. Awareness begins the moment we question this control. If we do not understand this inner system, it drives us into patterns we do not choose. We end up in relationships that drain us, careers that feel hollow, and habits that sabotage growth. Jung believed the purpose of life is to awaken and take back the controls. Carl Jung was born in Switzerland in 1875. He grew up as an introverted child, often isolated, spending long hours in solitude. Instead of joining others, he immersed himself in imagination, make-believe worlds, and careful observation of adults. These early tendencies laid the groundwork for his inner explorations. Jung struggled with school in his youth, even fainting to avoid classes. Yet as he matured, he discovered a hunger for learning. He turned to philosophy and religion, reading deeply on his own. The worlds of ideas and symbols fascinated him, planting seeds for the psychology he would later create. From an eccentric mother and a father who was a pastor, Jung inherited both spiritual curiosity and an awareness of human fragility. His early life of solitude, daydreaming, and inner reflection shaped the foundations of his theories. Long before he studied medicine, Jung was already studying the soul. In 1907, Jung met Sigmund Freud, the most famous psychologist of the era. Their first conversation lasted 13 hours, sparking a deep professional bond. Freud saw Jung as a promising heir, while Jung viewed Freud as a mentor. Their relationship quickly took on the dynamics of father and son. Together they traveled, lectured, and analyzed each other's dreams. Jung admired Freud's groundbreaking work, but soon felt constrained by Freud's reductionist focus on sexuality. Jung's own vision was broader, mystical, and symbolic. Tensions grew as Jung's ideas challenged Freud's authority, creating friction beneath the surface of their collaboration. By 1913, disagreements about the nature of the psyche and Jung's need for independence fractured the friendship. The break devastated Jung, throwing him into a psychological crisis. Yet this painful split freed him to develop his own theories, launching a lifetime devoted to exploring the depths of the unconscious. After his break with Freud in 1913, Jung entered a profound psychological crisis. For years he felt haunted by visions, dreams, and overwhelming emotions. Instead of fleeing, he turned inward, recording his experiences and experimenting with his own unconscious. This period became both his breakdown and his breakthrough. Jung described confronting terrifying inner images that felt more real than daily life. He treated his psyche like a laboratory, engaging in deep introspection and symbolic dialogue. Though he feared madness, these explorations gave him first-hand insight into the unconscious, its structures, and its power over human behavior. By 1918, Jung had emerged with renewed clarity. The crisis crystallized his theories of the psyche and established him as an independent thinker. What could have destroyed him instead transformed him. He proved that entering the depths of the unconscious was not insanity, but the path to wisdom. For Jung, the psyche meant the total personality. It included thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and unconscious contents that shape us beyond awareness. Unlike Freud, who emphasized parts, Jung sought wholeness. The psyche was not fragments to be explained separately, but an integrated system striving for balance and completeness within itself. Jung believed the fundamental goal of life was individuation. This is the process of becoming whole, uniting the conscious with the unconscious, and aligning with the true self. Individuation is not perfection, but integration, where light and shadow coexist. It is the journey of becoming your authentic and complete self, This lifelong process requires deep honesty. You must confront what is hidden and accept what is uncomfortable. Individuation means recognizing that who you think you are is only partial. True fulfillment comes when you integrate the unseen parts of your psyche and step into a unified sense of being. Jung divided the psyche into three main levels. The first is consciousness, the everyday awareness through which we experience ourselves and the world. At the center of this level sits the ego, the storyteller of identity. Consciousness provides stability, but represents only a small portion of our total personality. Beneath lies the personal unconscious, where forgotten memories and repressed experiences live. This is where the psyche stores content the ego cannot or will not handle. Though hidden, these elements continue to influence our thoughts and behaviors, surfacing in dreams, slips of the tongue, or emotional reactions that feel unexplainable. Deeper still is the collective unconscious, Jung's most radical idea. This is a universal reservoir of shared human experience, inherited across generations. It contains archetypes, symbols, and patterns that shape human life everywhere. Jung believed this collective layer explains why myths, stories, and dreams repeat across cultures and history. At the center of consciousness sits the ego, the structure that builds identity. The ego gives continuity to our lives by telling a coherent story about who we are. It organizes memories and choices into a narrative that maintains stability, even if the story is incomplete or distorted. The ego is necessary for daily life. It distinguishes self from others and creates the sense of I. Yet Jung emphasized that the ego is not the whole personality. It is only a fragment of the psyche, often mistaking itself for the entire self and ignoring the unconscious. Problems arise when the ego identifies too strongly with its story. We cling to roles and labels, believing they define us completely. Jung taught that real growth requires loosening the ego's grip, recognizing it as one part of a larger system, and allowing the deeper self to emerge. Jung called the persona the mask we wear to meet society's expectations. It is the version of ourselves crafted to gain approval, respect, or acceptance. The persona allows us to function in groups and roles, but it is not the truth of who we really are inside. This mask is useful because society requires adaptation. Yet danger arises when we confuse the persona with our authentic self. We begin to believe the role is the reality. Jung explained that over-identification with the persona leads to emptiness, because the mask cannot satisfy the deeper needs of the soul. Warning signs of persona dominance include exhaustion after social interactions, hiding vulnerabilities, and seeking validation more than truth. Jung taught that individuation requires balancing the persona with authenticity. The mask should serve, not rule. To become whole, we must gradually take off the mask and reveal the true self. Jung described the shadow as the collection of traits, memories, and desires the ego rejects. It is the part of ourselves we deny or repress because it feels shameful, weak, or unacceptable. Yet the shadow never disappears. It waits in the unconscious, influencing us from behind the scenes. The shadow emerges through projections. We condemn in others what we secretly reject in ourselves. Strong overreactions often reveal hidden material. Jung warned that denying the shadow makes it dangerous. Ignored, it grows powerful, manifesting as destructive behavior, addictions, or repeated patterns we cannot explain but feel powerless to stop. Integration of the shadow is central to individuation. Jung emphasized that wholeness requires radical self-acceptance. Instead of pretending to be pure light, we must acknowledge our darkness. By owning the shadow, we transform its raw energy into creativity, compassion, and strength. Denial enslaves, but integration leads to freedom. Jung's boldest insight was the collective unconscious. He believed beneath the personal unconscious lies a deeper layer shared by all humanity. This collective reservoir contains inherited patterns, images, and instincts that shape human life. It explains why myths, dreams, and symbols repeat across cultures, that never encountered one another. Jung called these universal patterns archetypes. They are psychic blueprints that influence thought and behavior. Figures like the hero, the mother, or the wise old man appear everywhere, from ancient myths to modern films. These archetypes live in the collective unconscious, shaping how individuals experience life and relate to others. The collective unconscious reveals that we are not isolated minds. We inherit the psychological history of humanity itself. Jung argued that to become whole, we must engage these archetypes consciously. Ignoring them leaves us controlled by their power. Awareness transforms the collective unconscious from hidden influence into guiding wisdom. Archetypes are universal symbols that structure the human psyche. They are not learned but inherited, existing as timeless patterns in the collective unconscious. The hero, the mother, the child, the trickster, these figures appear in mythology, religion, and dreams. They express the deepest forces shaping our imagination and behavior. Jung emphasized that archetypes act like blueprints of experience. They do not dictate specific actions, but predispose us to certain ways of perceiving and responding. For example, the hero archetype pushes individuals toward struggle and growth, while the shadow archetype reveals inner conflict. Archetypes color life with meaning and direction. Engaging archetypes consciously allows us to understand ourselves more deeply. They guide creativity, relationships, and spirituality. But ignored, they can distort into obsessions or projections. Jung believed individuation requires recognizing archetypes at work within us, transforming them from unconscious influences into conscious allies on the path to the true self. Jung described the anima as the feminine aspect within every man. It includes sensitivity, intuition, receptivity, and emotional depth. Because society often discourages these traits in men, they are pushed into the unconscious. Yet the anima continues to influence relationships, dreams, and creativity, appearing symbolically as women in mythology or imagination. When denied, the anima distorts into moodiness, irrational obsession, or dependency. Jung warned that unintegrated anima can dominate a man's behavior unconsciously, pulling him toward destructive attachments. But when embraced consciously, the anima becomes a bridge to the unconscious, guiding growth, the balance, and deeper connection with both self and others. Integrating the anima means accepting inner qualities often labeled as weakness. Jung believed that wholeness requires men to honor these traits instead of repressing them. By engaging the anima honestly, men recover lost vitality and cultivate authenticity. The anima is not an enemy, but a vital part of becoming whole. Jung described the animus as the masculine aspect within every woman. It represents logic, reason, assertiveness, and inner authority. Because culture often pushes women into roles of passivity or caretaking, these traits are suppressed. The animus then hides in the unconscious, influencing choices and appearing symbolically in myths or dreams. When denied, the animus can distort into rigid opinions, harsh criticism, or dominance over others. Jung warned that an unintegrated animus often controls a woman unconsciously, shaping her thoughts in destructive ways. But when acknowledged, the animus becomes a source of clarity, courage, and creative strength, aligned with authenticity. Integrating the animus means embracing inner authority and independence without losing compassion. Jung taught that women who engage the animus consciously recover balance and vitality. Instead of being driven by unconscious masculine forces, they channel them into growth and wholeness. The animus is not a threat but a hidden ally. Jung believed true psychological balance requires integration of anima and animus. Within each person, the repressed feminine or masculine qualities must be acknowledged and embraced. This union restores inner harmony. Without it, we remain divided, projecting unmet aspects of ourselves onto partners, creating cycles of conflict, dependency, or misunderstanding. When integration occurs, relationships transform. Instead of seeking wholeness through another person, you discover it within yourself. Partners become companions, not substitutes for lost aspects of your psyche. Jung explained that anima and animus are bridges to the unconscious, and integrating them strengthens authenticity, balance, and resilience. The union of anima and animus symbolizes the marriage of opposites within the psyche. It is not about erasing gender differences, but reconciling polarity inside every individual. Jung taught that this integration brings greater creativity, deeper self-knowledge, and a sense of completeness. Wholeness emerges when opposites live in harmony. For Jung, individuation was the central task of life. It is the process of uniting conscious and unconscious elements to form the self, the authentic core of personality. Individuation does not erase flaws or darkness. Instead, it integrates them into a balanced whole, creating depth, resilience, and authenticity. This process requires courage because it demands facing hidden aspects of the psyche. Dreams, projections, and emotional triggers become guides. Each confrontation with the unconscious is an opportunity to recover what was lost or denied. Individuation unfolds slowly, step by step, as you learn to embrace both shadow and light. Individuation is not perfection, but wholeness. It transforms life from unconscious repetition into conscious creation. Jung believed that the more a person individuates, the more authentic and fulfilled they become. To become your true self is to walk the path of individuation, a lifelong journey into integration and meaning. Jung taught that individuation is impossible without integrating the shadow. The shadow contains repressed anger, fear, envy, weakness, and also hidden creativity and strength. If denied, it controls us unconsciously. Facing the shadow requires radical honesty. You must admit what you fear and accept what you would rather ignore. Integration does not mean indulging destructive impulses, but transforming their energy. Anger becomes assertiveness, fear becomes caution, envy becomes motivation, and weakness becomes humility. Jung explained that confronting the shadow expands your capacity for compassion. When you accept your darkness, you stop projecting it onto others, breaking cycles of judgment. The shadow is not evil but incomplete. It is the part of you longing for recognition. By integrating it, you reclaim vitality and authenticity. Jung emphasized that wholeness demands embracing imperfection. Light and dark must coexist. The person who faces their shadow walks more consciously and lives more fully. Jung described the self as the ultimate archetype, the center of the psyche that unites all opposites. Unlike the ego, which tells a partial story, the self embraces totality. It includes consciousness and unconsciousness, persona and shadow, anima and animus. The self is the symbol of wholeness and unity. To reach the self requires transcending the persona. The social mask cannot define you. Individuation gradually dismantles illusions and reconnects you with deeper truths. Jung emphasized that the self is not an ideal image of perfection, but a living balance, where every aspect of the psyche finds its rightful place. When a person lives aligned with the self, life feels authentic and meaningful. Challenges remain, but they no longer fracture identity. Instead, each experience becomes integrated into a larger whole. Jung believed that awakening to the self is the greatest achievement of human life, the realization of true being. Jung insisted that becoming whole requires radical self-acceptance. Most people hide their flaws, deny their weaknesses, and chase perfection. But wholeness is not perfection. It is the courage to embrace imperfection. By acknowledging mistakes, fears, and failures, you disarm their power and transform them into sources of growth and wisdom. Avoiding flaws only strengthens the shadow. Rejected traits sink deeper, waiting to erupt through projection or self-sabotage. Jung explained that repression never heals. Acceptance does. When you admit your humanity, you integrate what was lost. Radical self-acceptance reconnects you with reality and grounds you in authentic strength instead of fragile illusion. This acceptance is not indulgence, it is responsibility. By owning your weaknesses, you stop blaming others and start transforming yourself. Jung believed that only through embracing the full spectrum of your nature, light and dark, strength and fragility, can you discover the freedom of being your true self completely. Jung warned that running from the shadow never weakens it. Suppressed traits grow more powerful the longer they remain unacknowledged. Anger denied becomes rage. Fear avoided becomes paralysis. Desire repressed becomes obsession. The shadow gains energy from rejection, waiting for moments of weakness to erupt unconsciously and take control. When you flee from darkness, you unconsciously feed it. Projection ensures you see in others what you refuse to admit in yourself. Jung explained that constant avoidance leads to cycles of blame and judgment. You condemn others for the very flaws you secretly harbor, remaining blind to your own. Integration begins when you stop running and turn to face what you fear. Jung emphasized that courage to meet the shadow is the turning point of individuation. By confronting hidden aspects directly, you remove their secret power. What once ruled you from the dark becomes reclaimed strength and wisdom. Jung wrote that the real goal of life is not comfort, wealth, or even happiness, but to make the darkness conscious. He believed that enlightenment does not come from imagining light, but from facing shadow. True growth demands bringing unconscious material into awareness instead of leaving it buried. This process transforms fate into choice. When unconscious patterns rule, we repeat cycles blindly. But once they are seen, we gain freedom to respond differently. Jung explained that every time you illuminate darkness, you expand consciousness. The more you integrate, the more life becomes authentic, intentional, and deeply meaningful. Making the darkness conscious is difficult work, but it is the foundation of individuation. Jung insisted that without it, you remain half alive, pulled by forces you cannot understand. To become your true self, you must shine awareness into hidden corners, turning weakness into strength and shadow into wisdom. Jung compared individuation to taking the wheel of your own life. Without awareness, the unconscious drives you along predetermined routes built from childhood wounds, cultural expectations, and repressed desires. You think you are steering, but the hidden navigation system decides. Individuation is the moment you reclaim true control. Taking the wheel does not mean eliminating the unconscious. Jung warned that would be impossible. Instead, it means building dialogue with it, integrating its wisdom, and balancing its power with conscious choice. Individuation transforms blind impulses into conscious direction, turning life from unconscious repetition into intentional creation filled with meaning. When you take the wheel, you no longer drift in borrowed identities or old habits. You live from the authentic self rather than the mask of persona or the fear of shadow. Jung taught that individuation is liberation. It makes you the driver of your destiny instead of its passenger. Jung believed that becoming your true self is the greatest but hardest journey in life. It requires peeling away masks, confronting shadows, and integrating hidden parts of the psyche. This path demands courage, persistence, and radical honesty, but it rewards with authenticity, balance, and a deep sense of meaning. Unlike external achievements, individuation cannot be measured by wealth, status, or recognition. It is an inner victory. Jung explained that few undertake this journey because it feels dangerous to abandon illusions. Yet those who dare discover a life not borrowed from others, but grounded in their deepest truth. Becoming your true self is never quick. It unfolds slowly, often through crisis and struggle. Jung insisted that this is not a weakness, but the nature of transformation. The cost is high, but the reward is wholeness. To live authentically is the greatest triumph of the human spirit.